Two friends meet up to drink some beers and talk about past times. Not yesterday, but long ago, it's scandals, wars and crimes. From Stalin's reign to Prohibition, Tudors, Pompey, Bush and NASA's mission, Edison's bulk, Genghis Khan's rise to victory. Forget your old teacher, it's time for Pint-Sized History.
Hi there, and welcome to Pint-Sized History. I'm Joe.
And I'm Zack.
And we're here to talk about the landmark events that have shaped the modern world we live in today and over a few brewskis. And let me tell you something exciting. In fact, I'll tell you what, I'll let Zack say it.
Great Brewery in Hackney are a fantastic independent brewer. They kindly sent us, it's really nice by the way, go check it out. It's an awesome pub. And they sent us 2 crates of beers. And I guess it's the first time on the show that we've actually had some form of like sponsorship. But they've sent us a crate. I'm drinking right now the Crate Haze, and I love hazy pale ales, so this is right up my street.
As do I, but I'm personally going for a lager myself, just to try something different for this. But who knows?
Don't you have a lager every single episode?
I do usually have a lager. I am a bit of a lager boy, but I will try one of the hazy ones later on. But yeah, thank you very much, Crate. We appreciate it.
Should we do a test? Should we taste it? All right, let's just quickly have a sip.
Okay, a quick test. What if we say, "Oh God, that's awful"?
I won't, because that was bloody lovely.
That's nice. I like it.
It's nice, isn't it?
Yeah. You can't go wrong with a nice, lovely lager.
No, of course not. I think
nice.
I think hazy pale ale is probably my favourite drinks. I think I love like
Especially to talk about history. Yeah, you need that.
Here's a bit of fun history. Do you know why India Pale Ale came into existence?
I don't. Is it to do with the way that they were exported back?
Yeah, so they export beer from England to India, and they basically had to add more hops to it to make it store well in the long voyage across the sea. So they added more hops, and that became India Pale Ale. People started enjoying that more, and that's that. But thank you very much, Crate. Anyone listening to this, go get yourself a lovely Crate beer.
Yes.
Nice. Shall we dive into the episode?
Well, what are we talking about this week, Zack?
Let me start.
Okay.
With,
I'll let you start.
And you'll probably be able to guess, because you've, read the description of the title of the episode. But also from this. It's a Shakespearean extract. This story shall the good man teach his son, and Crispians shall ne'er go by, from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers.
Yeah.
So, was this my extract or yours?
No, I wanted to say that it's such a good line.
For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. And that should give it away, but we're talking about Henry V. And this is
I thought we were talking about Shakespeare. See, you could take that either way.
My guy.
You could take that either way. But yes, talking about Henry V, which is exciting. Going far back, medieval Britain.
Yep, 1400s, basically.
1400s?
The 15th century Britain.
Exciting.
Or not Britain at the time, England.
England, yeah.
And this was a famous extract taken from Shakespeare's play on Henry V, which has been immortalised.
Yes.
And then subsequently re-immortalised by Kenneth Branagh, I'd say. What a and if you have a minute, watch the speech that I just read there. Kenneth Branagh, King Henry VIII speech.
Yeah, just Henry V. Yeah, go on YouTube and watch it. It's a classic of cinema.
And also recently re-immortalised again by Timothée Chalamet. It's one of our favourite films, I think.
In The King, yeah, I really enjoyed The King. I thought it was underrated. Timothée Chalamet playing Henry V, which is the portrait you can see behind us if you're looking at the visual podcast. That is the portrait of King Henry V of England, and Timothée Chalamet plays kind of the more Shakespearean version of him. I think The King is kind of, because there's no Falstaff. The Falstaff is a character created by Shakespeare in the Henry V play, and they use it for the movie The King, even though Falstaff was not a real person, I think. So
well, sounds like you know an awful lot about it. Maybe take these.
Yeah, please, actually. Yeah, go on, I'll take them.
No, you can't have them. I love this. I'm so fascinated by that. I really, really like Henry V. His story, it's really intriguing. When I was beginning my research for this, I wasn't too sure, too sold on how it looked for an episode. But the more I dived into it, the more it's like this crazy fucking medieval chaotic story, like very Game of Thronesy. But this is like before War of the Roses, which is like the ultimate what Game of Thrones
inspired.
Based on,
yeah, absolutely.
So just to give a brief summary about Henry V. He's probably one of the most famous English kings in history. Note that obviously we're doing a podcast on him, so that should speak to his fame. If Zack and Joe from the Pint-Sized History podcast talking about him, then
is he top 5 most famous though?
Top English kings?
Kings, yeah.
I would say top 3.
Henry VIII, William the Conqueror. I'd probably put Richard the Lionheart over him. I don't think Henry V is as famous as Richard the Lionheart, no. And also you count Charles. As in this Charles.
This Charles.
Or George V.
I mean, kind of.
you
Who
know.
gives a fuck about this Charles?
Well, I mean, he
And
is
his
famous,
big old
though.
chubby
Obviously,
fingers.
He's not as iconic, yeah, sure, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Sausage fingers.
He's also probably the greatest warrior king in English history. Being a warrior and a king.
Surely
he
that's
loved the
debatable.
battle.
Is
and
that
battle
true?
of, yeah, I would say so. Edward III's also great.
Yeah.
You could maybe say warrior queen as well, but
Yeah.
Elizabeth wasn't really a fighter, more like a strategist, I guess. He cemented England's status as a superpower by defeating the French and attempting to integrate the two kingdoms. And I won't give any spoilers about what happens, but he's well known for his feat at the Battle of Agincourt, one of my favourite historical battles, I'd say.
It should be everyone that's English's
Absolutely.
favourite.
Too
Agincourt
right.
is a source of national pride and we've got a very complicated and rich history of incidents and events and bad things and good things. But Agincourt is probably one of the good ones. It's one of, where we stuck it to the French in probably the best. Of all the times we stuck it to the French, that's probably the best.
We really stuck it to
That
them.
was the most sticking to that the French received.
And I got to tell you, we really stuck it to them. It's kind of nasty, like how badly we give the French a run and what for.
Yeah.
So let's dive in to England at the time. Do you know much about England? In
England
the
in
14th
general?
century.
In the 14th
go on.
century.
Give me the entire history of England.
Is his father Henry IV?
What a great guess that was.
Well, Henry IV is obviously before him. I don't know if that was his dad. But I don't know that. I couldn't tell you what's happened much before that. But I believe this is either the start of or in the midst of the 100 Years' War. Am I right in thinking?
You're right.
Okay.
I'll go.
Yeah, but I don't know that much. I really don't know that much. So please.
Right, we're going a bit
inform
further
us.
back. So England is obviously not like it is today. It doesn't really comprise Wales, Scotland, parts of Wales, parts of Scotland. There's warring between the Scottish and the Welsh, and because of William the Conqueror and his influence, we are essentially tied at the hip historically with the French. And because of William and the Normans and us having titles and holdings in Normandy and in France, like there was an English holding in Calais at the time of Henry V.
Yes.
It all makes it rather incestuous, like incredibly interbrooded, I guess you could say. But importantly, the French were the dominant kingdom in Europe, in Western Europe at the time. They were very strong, very wealthy, and they probably thought they were better than everyone.
Yeah.
But importantly, in France at the time, it's very fractious. There's different factions, different families warring because Charles VI is a mad king at this time. He thinks he's made of glass. So France is going crazy. England is tied at the hip with France, and things are very confusing. What's important is that when the French king Charles IV died, there were no male heirs to the throne in 1328, 100 years before Henry V.
That's always a problem.
The nobles and the aristocracy typically don't like women leading them, and also the French don't like English people ruling them. And the only blood relative or blood heir of King Charles V was Edward III. So it leads a power vacuum and different claims of titles, and it all gets just a bit crazy.
So basically, the only real successor that's obvious to the French king is actually the English king.
An English king, yeah.
Yeah.
And the French people do not like that. So this starts the 100 Years' War, and then you get a whole mess. But I'll come back to that in a second, because I want to talk to you briefly about the Plantagenet Dynasty, which is the famous English ruling house.
Is that not from William the Conqueror himself?
No, this is from the Angevins. So they came from an area called Anjou. And there's four notable branches of the dynasty. One is the main line of the Plantagenet dynasty, which is Henry III, Edward I, Edward II, Edward III, and then Richard II. The Angevins, who later became the kings of England from 1154 to 1216 after William the Conqueror. The House of Lancaster, created by Henry III, and then Henry IV, who then succeeded him as the head of the House of Lancaster. This is because Henry III created the Earldom of Lancaster, so they became a cadet branch of the main family. This is like, I don't know if you, obviously we played a lot of Crusader Kings, so you know all about main lines of dynasties and the cadet branches they have, but it all gets incredibly intermingling and weird and confusing.
Yeah.
As different parts of the family have different claims for different titles, and it's all incredibly political and really confusing. So this bit is confusing, but I need to set out what the Plantagenet dynasty are like.
Okay.
There's also the House of York. And famously, the York and Lancaster houses had a civil war after Henry V died, called the War of the Roses.
War of the Roses. So that happens literally as he dies.
After that, it's about 20 years after he dies.
Okay, wow.
Yeah. The Plantagenets ruled England in some shape or form from 1154 until 1485. But they weren't the most effective rulers. They typically took a lot of power away from themselves. They gave a lot of power to churches. They signed the Magna Carta, which gave more protections for barons and landowners, gave them access to impartial justice, and ensured limitations on payments to the crown through taxes. They took England through this psychotic psychodrama that it's like now in, leaving England in a terrible place by the time they finished. But they did have some great rulers like Edward I, Edward III, and Henry VIII. So now we're coming back to Edward III. Briefly talked about what the Plantagenets are like, but we need to go back to Edward III now.
Edward III is Henry V's grandfather?
He is Henry V's great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather, yeah.
So he was the son of Edward II, who was widely considered a terrible king, and also rumoured to be gay, which is not very well sought after. I'm trying to think of a really diplomatic way of talking about it. The nobles didn't like gay people, basically. Back then, if you were gay, you were not getting a good time.
Was that the reason he was unpopular?
He was also like a party animal, like flaunting his wealth a little bit. He wasn't a good guy.
Nice.
And he was overthrown by his wife, Isabella of France. Again, the incestuous nature of English kingships comes into play. And her lover, Roger Mortimer, which I quite like the name.
Roger Mortimer.
Roger Mortimer, yeah. So Isabella and Roger Mortimer basically overthrow Edward III because no one likes him. He's gay. Because of that, he's going to be hated. Also, well, it's not actually.
No one likes him. He's gay.
There's no actually historical validity to whether he was actually gay, but sources suggest that he might have been homosexual, and that fuels like rumours around the English court, which doesn't look great on the king. So Edward III then begins his reign as king. This is after Isabella and Roger Mortimer have been watching over the throne until Edward III comes of age. Basically, he's a really good king. He tries to make England a really powerful kingdom again, as it was under his great-grandfather Edward I. But as this happens, Charles IV dies. Charles IV was the only male heir, being his great-nephew Edward III. And Edward decided, as all great English kings do,
I want that.
I want a bit of that French
France,
land.
France, I want that.
It's my blood. It's my right. This is it is. His legally it is his right to have the French kingdom. But because the French nobles and the French barons don't like the English, they don't want to see it. They don't want to see my boy cook.
No.
They don't want to see him on that.
Which is outrageous because your boy should cook, but they're just not letting him, and that's really
And let him cook.
Yeah.
Really let him cook, Joe.
Well, I'd like it if he did. Is he going to? Spoilers.
He tries.
Oh,
he absolutely tries.
But he doesn't.
So at this time, a lot of France is already English. Like I said before, there's holdings in Aquitaine, which is part of southwestern France, and parts of in Calais as well, and areas in Normandy, which is English. Sorry. And on the 22nd of June, 1340, Edward III sails into France, and the English fleet destroys the French fleet at the Battle of Sluis, which is an area in Flanders, which I think today is Holland or Belgium. Okay. Edward basically has to retreat after the battle because they're running out of money, and this is a big part of the history of English kings. They have to petition Parliament for money. They have to gather money from barons. They're really costly wars, and they can't invade for long periods of time. So they can maybe invade for about a year campaign and then have to retreat back into UK. Well, not UK, sorry, back into England, and then go on like a campaign to get more money to fund their next spree.
Yeah.
So after this incredibly successful battle, they destroyed the French fleet at the Battle of Sluis. Edward retreats, and he comes back 6 years later with a major invasion, landing on the Normandy Cotentin Peninsula. This is really successful, and the English army captured Caen. This then leads to the Battle of Crécy and Poitiers, where English longbowmen devastated larger French armies.
Yeah, they're not as famous as Agincourt, those two battles, but they are quite known within history. We
got them good.
Yeah, again, two battles where we really outplayed them, really.
Yeah.
Which is so funny.
Edward III was running up and down the wing.
We always talk about how different battles are won purely from just a technological advance or something that the enemy is just not prepared for. And the longbow is one of it's certainly one of the things to be proud of for English medieval history. Is like how literally all we've just got is a really long stick that we shoot stuff through, and somehow it outplays
it wasn't even us.
This French army.
It wasn't even English. The Welsh invented the longbow. And the Welsh were known as like the greatest archers.
Sorry, that's my Gawain Price.
Gawain Price is a Welsh darts player who's actually just so entertaining to watch.
I mean, look, he's a modern day longbowman.
He is, you're right.
You know what I mean? Exactly. So thank you, Gezi.
180 Frenchmen dead.
Thank you, Gezi.
So the English army then captured Calais, and the Treaty of Bretigny was signed, which gave basically all of Aquitaine to the English, alongside different territories. So the 100 Years' War, which is this long 100-year battle between the French and English, comes to like a brief pause. It's still ongoing, but in like the 1340s to the 1380s, it kind of quietens down a little bit because of the Black Plague.
Oh, God.
Different economic developments and stuff like that.
That dastardly Black Plague.
Wasn't good. No.
Ooh, bad. That's an episode. Sorry, I'm just thinking of episodes on the spot.
You're just thinking
Write
like
that down.
Goen Price and the Black Plague.
Write that down.
So you got going
Goen
right
Price episode, Black Plague. Maybe put them together. Anyway, keep going.
Also, very sneaky of the French. Every time that the English would invade France, the English were allied to the Scottish. So the French would say, "Oh no, they are invading us again."
What the? Sorry. What was that? What? Does that supposed to be Scottish?
No, it was French.
Oh. Wait, still?
Yeah, it's still dodgy.
I mean, at least it's more. I thought you were doing Scottish.
No. We cannot let the English invade our soil.
Yeah, that's better. I mean, it's still not great, but that's
I sound like the trade ambassadors in Star Wars.
the Japanese trade ambassadors. Yeah.
Very, very racist, I must say.
Yeah. Legend.
And every time they invade it, they go, "Oh no, the English are invading Scotland. Just go invade England a little bit."
Yeah, it's funny because we're such a nuisance and like we are constantly invading, we're constantly fighting, we're constantly conquering. Basically, all of our biggest rivals always have to team up.
Oh, yeah.
So it's either the French or the Scots. Or when the Americans are trying to revolutionise, they have to use the French.
Yeah,
it's like they are always having to gang up, man.
Not just the French. The Americans also use the Spanish and the Dutch as well.
Yeah, they got it. They can't. No one can 1v1 us.
They can't take us on themselves, can they?
There's no 1v1 rust happening in these scenarios. There's always they have to get someone else to double team, to tag team, man.
Yeah, can't they just be brave and take us on man?
Well, they
Not
can't.
anymore.
They
I
can't.
wouldn't like to be taken man on man by the
I
Americans.
mean,
now.
I tell you one who did. The Battle of Britain, the Germans tried to take us on one-on-one, and they failed. And then we just kept stable until we then got our big ally, like, America, come help. And then we went back at them. That's what happens when you 1v1 us.
Yeah. Around 1377, Edward dies.
Oh,
and Richard
which
II...
Edward?
Edward III, yeah.
Right.
Good old Edward III, who battered the French at Crécy and Poitiers, he dies.
Okay.
And Richard II then comes to power.
Richie.
He's another member of the Plantagenet main line, but he was only 10 years old at the time. And in England, a peasants' revolt occurs, which Richard II puts down horribly, as when any peasant revolts happen, it's usually suppressed with intense
you got it right.
persecution.
If you give them an inch, then
they
suddenly,
take a mile. Those peasants.
The whole country will, right? If they think, oh well, this one peasant's result could actually do anything, then other ones will spring up, thinking, well, maybe it's our turn. It's
Yeah, and can't let them think that. Put them in their place, those damn proletariat.
Yeah.
The revolt is eventually ended, but not before the peasant crowd had burned houses in Westminster and sacked the Tower of London. They'd killed the Archbishop of Canterbury and some other notable nobles there. They also found the future Henry IV in one of the rooms of the Tower of London, but they didn't execute him for whatever reason. I think there's two members of the revolt who step in and stop him from dying, which is crazy because that could have completely reshaped English history if Henry IV, father of Henry V, dies.
I mean, well, everything would be different, obviously. Yeah.
Richard II then effectively deals with the revolt, and that's the first crisis of his realm, which is one of the big talking points of his reign. Following on from this, he basically puts in power a group of people called the Lords Appellant, which are a group of very strong, very wealthy, very powerful nobles. Henry IV is one of them, alongside a number of other people. This leads the barons around the country to get really angry that Richard II has this really strong group of 5 members at the core, these Lords Appellant. And eventually Henry IV is then banished for 10 years. But whilst being banished, he builds up wealth and he builds up allies and eventually comes back to England and overthrows and launches an uprising, taking down Richard II. So Henry IV, by the year 1990s, by the year 1397, has usurped Richard II, and he is now the King of England. He is the first King of England from the House of Lancaster.
A rough time span of this between these years.
So Edward III,
that's a lot of turbulence for the English kingdom.
Which is what I'm saying. Edward III dies in 1377. And within 20 years, Richard II has reigned for about 20 years, and then Henry IV has usurped him and become king.
Crazy.
The first Lancastrian king. While being king, Henry IV did not have an easy time of it. He had a tough time. He was basically constantly beset by plots and rebellions, assassination attempts, including the revolt of, and I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, Owain Glyndwr, who is a Welsh prince, a Welsh man who believes he is the Prince of Wales. And during this time, we see the first sighting of our beloved warrior king Henry V come into battle as he leads some of the armies in this campaign. He has this like divine, because Henry V is born in Wales himself. He considers himself also the Prince of Wales at the time. That's a title granted to him by Henry IV.
Yeah, which is a title often given to the heir apparent to the British or English throne.
Prince William?
The Prince of Wales. Yeah.
So Henry V has this sort of like godly conviction about him and challenges Owain Glyndŵr in Wales to the right by God of the Prince of Wales. And they have this great campaign. Henry IV, his father, the king at the time, also had loads of different internal rebellions to deal with, such as the Percys, Henry Percy, or Henry Hotspurs, as he's called. And he's called Henry Hotspur because he has literally hot spurs. Do you know that?
No, but I could have guessed.
Yeah. So you know, when a knight is riding their horse, they have spurs, and they dig their spurs in to make the horse run fast, which is very cruel today, but not the time. So they called him Henry Hotspur because he wanted to charge straight into battle and get in there and sink his spurs into his horse to get there quickly. And Henry IV eventually puts down these rebellions. He defeats the Percys at the Battle of Northumberland. Henry V, his son, leads an army at the Battle of Shrewsbury.
So how old is Henry V at this point as he's starting to deal with these small rebellions across England?
Henry V is only 16 years old.
He's not even Henry V at this point. He's the Prince of Wales. But how old is the future King Henry V at this point?
Henry V, referred to as Prince Hal at the time by Shakespeare, is only 16 years old as he's embarking on these campaigns in Wales. So he's just kind of a lot of texts consider Henry V to be this like party boy, this wild animal, and that's conveyed by Shakespeare. And it's very historically inaccurate. That's not the way Henry was. Henry was basically serving an apprenticeship to become the future King of England for years. He was looking after a lot of the politics of his father's council, because his council was his father was getting really ill. He had like leprosy and epilepsy and some other things, and Henry was basically learning on the job. He was ready to become King of England because he'd served since he was 16, right under his father's nose, or under the wings of his father.
Right.
And he's leading these massive battles against Owain Glyndŵr and against the Percys when he's 16, 17 years old. So coming back to Henry IV, well, we get towards our main character of the story. Henry IV puts down his rebellions and defeats the Percys at the Battle of Northumberland. He also deals with Owain Glyndŵr at the Battle of Shrewsbury, and while doing so, his health wanes. He has disfigured skin and he suffers a fatal bout of a grave illness, and in 1413 this illness kills him. We're not sure what it was, but it's rumoured that it's leprosy and epilepsy, like I said before. By this time, Henry V was becoming a great part of the government, like I just said, and succeeds his father to become king in 1413. We're now at Henry's reign, but I think it's important because I haven't covered anything to do with Henry V basically yet, to give a little backstory and address some of the points you made earlier. So Henry V was born in 1386 in Monmouth Castle in Wales. Like I said, this title, the Prince of Wales, is gifted by his father because he's born in Wales. It's an essential part of who he is as a man. He was incredibly studious. He particularly loved martial affairs. He loved fighting and all things about it, and loved learning about that. He performed stoically in battle, putting down Owain Glyndŵr's rebellion, and then fought Henry Hotspur at the Battle of Shrewsbury. The Netflix film The King suggests that in doing so, he challenges Henry Hotspur to a one-on-one combat.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember that from like the opening scenes of the film.
In their knight armour, they're like in full plate armour.
Yeah,
but
great scene.
It is a great scene, but it's not true.
No, not true at all.
That's a shame.
I think someone from history here unpicks it, and they're like, why on earth would they do that? They do. I think there's a lot of chivalry in English kingships and English nobles and royals. And they have this idea of dueling as an important part of who they are. But you're not going to duel.
In reality, why would you? Jesus. I mean, that's such a high-risk solution to a problem that you can solve without killing yourself. Yeah,
but I think there's this like Catholic measure to it, because they're all Catholics. They're all incredibly influenced by God and what they think God wants and his values. So the Bible forbids the spilling of Christian blood. Yeah. And I think that kings and nobles in the West at the time were aware of this in Europe, and they kind of did go out their way to not make sure they spilled any blood or Christian blood, and that the religion was safeguarded. But obviously this is not the case when you want to conquer countries and be ruthless.
You basically just use the Bible and you use religious Catholic morals to yourself and your own like situation until it's against you, and then you just pretend it doesn't exist. That's kind of how all religion works. You use it when it helps you, and you just ignore it when it doesn't.
It's a really cynical take there on religion, isn't it?
No, I don't think it's cynical at all. I just think that in reality, people in power will do whatever it takes to continue having power and enlarge their power. And if that means that they will use whatever they can at their disposal, they will. But the second it then gets in the way, they will pretend it's nothing and pretend it's worthless. And that's the case through all religion. I mean, literally all religion. I'm not just talking Christianity, but like any religion that's, every religion is like, you should be nice to those that are of the same religion as you. You should be.
Is that what the Bible says?
And
That's biblical text, isn't it?
No, I'm not saying. No, obviously not word for word. But my point is that in reality,
Love thy neighbour.
This is not a thing where you should be killing people that are of the same as you. You should be killing people from other, which is why stuff like the Crusades is so expected, really, within reality. But there should be no. In theory, there should be no wars between Muslims and other Muslims and Christians between other Christians. But there were thousands and thousands of those types of conflicts and wars. So it's just you literally, they just follow. Anyone that's in power will just follow what they need to get the next thing that they can take.
Last episode was on Alexander the Great, but how do you think Darius and Sirius, is that his name?
Darius
Cyrus?
III was the king.
How do you think they got their empires?
The king of the kings. Through a lot of bloodshed, yeah.
Muslim.
Well, it was
bloodshed.
Cyrus the Great that got the Persian Empire. And I'm sure he did it through a lot of conquest. Yeah, exactly.
Apparently, Henry V is incredibly physically imposing as well. He's 6'3".
Wow,
which is incredibly tall for someone at that time.
Yeah, Timothy
The
Chalamet
average-
ain't 6'3", that's for sure.
Was he like 5'11", maybe 5'10"?
I
don't think he's short.
5'10", I imagine.
Yeah. The average height for an Englishman at this time is 5'7", so you can imagine he's
6'3"
head and shoulders above everyone else, basically.
Jesus.
He was slim. He had dark hair and a ring, which, if you're looking at the visual podcast, you can see behind me. This is a famous portrait of him, and I'll explain why this portrait is incredibly important in a second. And that's because I'm about to talk about the Battle of Shrewsbury. This is where Henry suffers a life-changing incident and a life-changing injury. He's fighting against the Percys and Owain Glyndwr at the Battle of Shrewsbury. And during this battle, large sets of longbowmen attacked either side against each other. This is like English strategy at the time. It's archers first. We're archery
nation.
kingdom and Age of Empires. We're an archery civilization. So, and longbowmen are very good there. Joe, you love them. I know you
do. I do absolutely love the longbows.
It was a military innovation at the time. It could potentially pierce even plate armor, which is becoming the most widely used source of armor at the time that knights and men-at-arms would wear. And this basically was one of the reasons why England turned into powerhouse, because they had the longbowmen, which could answer so many questions thrown at them by different countries, like cavalry and well-armored men-at-arms in huge numbers. And during this battle, one of these arrows might not have been from a longbow, but it was a bodkin point arrow, which means that it's basically lodges into your face and then gets stuck inside your skull, so you can't pull it out. But one of those hits Henry in his cheekbone. It almost kills him. But John Bradmore, the royal physician at the time, crafted a tool, and this is really fascinating.
Yeah.
You can go on YouTube and find a video of this guy showing how the tool works, how they made it. But they basically, it's like a metal tube, and they put something else inside it and pull the arrow through that tube, which means it can't get stuck in the skull. And they pull it out, but it leaves permanent scarring on the left cheek or the right cheek of Henry. And that's why you see in the portrait behind me while he's looking to the direction.
This is the official portrait of Henry V.
Absolutely, yeah. And because he wanted to avoid showing the scar on the other side of his cheek. Yeah. So
all of his portraits are like that. And you know what's so funny? This is completely coincidental, but I don't know where it was. It's somewhere on social media. I saw a literally just some random picture of every single English and British king and queen in like a row with their official portrait. And I remember, because I'd forgotten that was what it was, that his face is turned 90 degrees so you can't see the side of his face that was hit by the arrow. And I remember literally, this is literally yesterday or the day before, and I looked at Henry V and I thought, oh yeah, we're filming the podcast on him, that's his portrait. And then I remember, I was like, why? He's like the only one that is at a 90-degree angle. I was like, I wonder why they did that with that. And I was like, oh, of course that was why, because he literally had an arrow when he was 16 hit into his cheekbone. It's it's a really interesting fact.
Incredible he survived that, but that goes testament to Henry as well. He's always right in the thick of the battle. He's always putting himself in danger. He's always well up for the fight and knows that if he wants to inspire the men around him, he needs to be right in the middle of everything. And
just like Alexander the Great, just like all these big leaders that inspire the men around them. And
it's crazy to think that. Like, imagine going to war and serving next to Prince William. It's just never going to happen.
Yeah, it is.
But incredible, like, inspiration. You can imagine the troops around him being like, just feeling incredibly more moralised at the fact they had the king with them. And he does this as well at Battle of Agincourt. He's right in the centre of everything.
Yes.
And he almost dies during it because he gets hit on the head with an axe during it. So now at the age of 26, King Henry V, our Prince Hal, the person who has been gravely injured but, now just has scarring on his cheek and has lived tales worthy of men double his age.
By the way, kudos to his medic there, because my God, like I can't imagine how intense, quick thinking you would need to actually save someone that's got a arrow in their cheekbone. So the fact that he's even around now for this part of the story is insane.
It's incredible, yeah. So he's been kind of in the background for around 10 years or so, watching how it's done, learning from his father, being involved in wars.
Clearly observing very astutely.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what he does. He's a great learner, and he's incredibly driven and has this immense energy about him. And he immediately starts tackling domestic issues. He made it clear that he wanted to rule as a head of a united England, so forgave old foes of his father and buries the body finally of Richard II, who was never found because of assassination attempts against him while he was in the prison of Henry IV.
Right.
So he tries to appease to all sides of the dynasty and the nobles around to show that he is a king for everyone.
Yeah.
He's not just a king for himself and the House of Lancaster. He wants to serve England and better English ideals. He deals with uprisings such as the Lollard Uprising, which I didn't know this, but the Lollardy is actually a proto-Protestant Catholic movement. So I think one of the early foundations of Protestantism,
before it became so mainstream.
Before it became the official religion of England. 100 years later, he has to deal with an uprising to put it down. And he crushed them brutally at a battle in St Giles Fields and executed and burned his old friend Sir John Oldcastle, who is apparently who John Falstaff is based on.
Okay.
He's ruling with an iron fist, but he's also ruling a united nation. He's appealing to the nobility, but he's crushing any challenges immensely well. And he's really good at that political game. He can play it really well. And with that, he has an eye on foreign affairs. He's dealt with domestic issues and puts down plots to depose him in favour of other people, and he's sort of cemented his role, but he's not really convinced everyone yet, which is why he feels like he needs to turn to foreign affairs and start going for invasions and campaigns and finally press his claim to France. He was always dead set on this invasion of France and taking the titles back for him, and in doing so, like I said earlier, any king has to be really good at petitioning Parliament and getting money for their cause, and he is really, really good at doing that. He can go to Parliament basically whenever he wants and give them a rousing speech and authorise the collection of more taxes to put forward any wars that he has planned. And he's really good petitioning barons and landowners and other forms of revenue and income for campaigns, and he can do that effectively.
Right.
So the stage is set.
Yes.
Henry V is now in power. He has lobbied Parliament. He's united his kingdom slightly. He's got money for an intense campaign.
How old is he at this point?
At this point, I think he's around, I would say he's around 26 or something like that. Okay. So he's come to power at 26.
Right.
And I think this was 2 years later, so he'll be 28 about now.
Okay, yeah.
And he's dealt with domestic issues. He has still like a pressing, lack of credibility, and no one's really sure of him yet. And he's put everything in place that he knows he wants to go for France. And he knows that as every good king does, he's got to go as an English king and take over their lands,
France.
Unite it into the English realms.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably, unfortunately, where I'd leave part one of this story.
No, but we were just getting into the thick of it.
Yeah, I want to hook you. I want to get you going.
Oh, man, my hands are clammy. I was like, here we go. It's time for France.
We're going. And this is the most exciting part of the story. And I know this kind of last 45 minutes has basically hardly been about Henry V. But I just wanted to paint this picture of how crazy England is at the time. Everyone's plotting against each other. There's murders, uprisings, everything. And now we have this man, this suddenly Henry V, who's come out of nowhere, an usurper for a father, who's not really convincing the barons and nobles of the kingdom. And he's decided to go on this great campaign and conquer France.
Honestly, what unites people more than the idea of sticking it to an external enemy? And in a sense of, even if it's internal or external, the idea of all of us working together. It's one thing to say, because so many leaders do this throughout history. I want to be a ruler for the whole country. I want to be a leader for all of us, not just the people that voted for me, but all of us. Not just the people that like me, but for all of us. And in reality, you need to then prove it. And one way that you can prove it is to convince people that there's an enemy that we should all be united against and we should go towards them. And Henry V literally takes that and runs with it. And not only goes after England's most immortal enemy, which is France, but also at a
Immortal enemy.
Well, I'm not
The
sure.
undying
word.
French.
Yeah, it is. And in a, fashion that's incredible. He's this young king. He's already fought in battles himself. I'm sure there are plenty of rumours about him and his cheekbone with his, that he was shot in a battle before. It's like the story kind of tells itself, and that will be the case for the average English peasant that's heard about this boy king, and they're like, he wants to go for France.
No, not a boy anymore.
Don't mind that. To many people, he's a boy. I mean, obviously but if he comes into power at 26, sure, he's 26, but he's, for many people, that's he's
26 is a good life at the time.
No, I know, but
healthy.
I don't. I'm sure that the average person isn't thinking 26. Oh, what a mature man! It's like, come on, he's got
to prove himself still.
He's still got to prove himself, and I think it's interesting.
You got ahead of me there, but I did have noted down in my notes because it's so obvious, isn't it? Like, to unite a kingdom, attack a foreign enemy.
Yeah.
How many times can you remember it? Or like some big notes from history.
Last episode, Alexander the Great, pretty much the same thing.
I had a couple here off the top of my head, and I'm not sure how relevant they are, but like very recently, Afghanistan and Iraq for Bush and Blair.
Yeah.
The Vietnam War for Nixon and Johnson.
Yeah. It was before them, wasn't it? I thought it was Eisenhower that started that war.
Vietnam?
Yeah.
No, Eisenhower was the 50s. It was Korean War.
No.
Yeah. I'll bet you £10 right now that Eisenhower had nothing to do with Vietnam.
Nothing to do with it.
Well, maybe something, but nothing to do with the actual declaration of American war against Vietnam.
Who was it after? Yeah, I'll bet that. £10.
Yeah, all right.
Shake my hand. I think that the Vietnam War started under Eisenhower.
Yeah, it didn't, but sure.
Okay, well, I'm happy to lose £10.
I said Germany, World War II.
Yeah.
This, to be fair,
I mean, Germany's a bit different because that was pure world conquest type style. It's not like the German people were united under him before that anyway. I mean, I guess you could say that his rhetoric was always that there were people that were wronging Germany, like the Jews or the Bolsheviks or whatever, the Western powers. So I guess it is external. I mean, to be honest with you, it is just part of the playbook, even not just for dictators, but for anyone that really wants to solidify their realm. Ooh. They will always push that there's a power that's a problem that they need to deal with.
The Winter War for the Soviet Union in that case?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. This is an unfair example because Argentina was not... they attacked us, not we attacked them. But my point is, Margaret Thatcher was not a popular leader before the Falklands War happened. Yeah. And suddenly, when there's an external enemy, that all of Britain, even the people that hate Margaret Thatcher, can agree we want those islands.
Even the coal miners
it brings
didn't like
it brings everyone together. It's it's kind of like, you could almost say everything is like that. Anyway, is this the end of the episode?
Let's wrap up there. Okay. Thank you for listening to the last 45.
What we listened to in part 2? What's going to be happening?
Part 2, we're talking all about the most notable parts of Henry V's reign as king, which is the conquest of France and the famous Battle of Agincourt, which I love and I can't wait to dive deeper into.
Sweet.
But thank you very much for watching.
We'll see you in the next episode.
Bye-bye.